Hey everyone, this is Blake. So a common question is, what kind of computer do I need to get started in virtual orchestration? Now this is a question that I've kind of thought about a pretty good bit recently, and I decided to do an experiment. So what I did was I took computers from different years and with different levels of hardware and created a sort of benchmark, if you will, to see how they compare to one another. I took one of my already released and completed tracks under the Icy Peaks and extracted the MIDI data from Logic and moved it over to Reaper. The reason I did this is because Reaper is extremely light on resources and it's also extremely stable. So I felt like it was probably the best workstation to choose when running on machines that may not be quite up to par. Then I took my most efficient orchestral library. This would be VSL's Synchron Prime. And I created a Reaper version of my track Under the Icy Peaks, which I then ran on each of the machines in question. The machines I have in question are from different years. One is from around 2009. One is from 2011. I have two that are from around 2013 or 14. One that's from around 2017 or 18. And then I have a few that are more modern from recent years. And the idea being to run this project on all of them and see if they're able to keep up. All of this is in an attempt to see how much horsepower do you need in a machine to get started in virtual orchestration. Obviously, when you add more tracks, eventually you'll reach a point where you need better hardware. But to get started, how much do you need? And this video should be a way to show that it may not be as much as you think. So first I'm going to play this project on my main Windows machine just to give an example of how it should run and sound. This particular machine is a Core i5-8600K with 32 gigabytes of RAM, and it has several SSDs in it running each of the libraries. So everything is on SSD storage. So this is probably the best Windows machine that I have, and so this is what we're trying to emulate with our lower spec machines that we're going to get into in just a moment. All right, let's go to the second half. I won't be playing the entire track. I'll be playing the most CPU and IO intensive parts just to save some time. So we'll go to the second half of the song here and see what our resource usage looks like here. And then our final portion that I want to look at is right at the very end. There's a violin run that is extremely intensive because of the amount of samples it has to trigger. So I'll be playing this one. Okay, so that is the project running on my main PC. So let's see how our lower spec machines handle it. So the first machine that I actually ran this test on is one of my first laptops from 2009. It's a Dell Studio 15, and it has a Core 2 Duo CPU and 4 gigs of RAM. So by today's standards, extremely low spec. But I was curious to see how it would handle running this project. For all of these tests, I recorded the video as I do most of my videos using a video recorder. So there is no video processing software running on each machine, taking away any CPU cycles. So all of the CPU that is available is being used to process the audio. So for the Studio 15, here is how the test went. So far, so good. Oh. Yeah, it starts to fall apart a little bit. As you can see, the CPU is pegged basically at 100%. Memory's at about 86%. So this is not quite able to keep up. If I move a little bit forward. Yeah, that's about what you can get. No matter how many times I listen, and right there I tried to pause it, and that's what happened. But if I go to this portion of the project, it's going to get even worse. Yeah, it's not having a good time. The one thing that this is kind of a advertisement for Reaper, because no matter what you're asking it to do, it refuses to crash. It just keeps running, which is, I think, hilarious. So in this case, the Core 2 Duo is surprisingly not enough. It's extremely underspec'd for even the minimum requirements for VSL Synchron Prime, so I'm not that surprised. But it was something I was curious about, and I got my answer, and it's not that surprising. So you need something better than a 2009 laptop with 2 cores and 4 gigabytes of RAM. Sorry. So next is actually one of the ones that I was most interested in. It is an HP 8300 small form factor business PC. You can pick these up refurbished for varying amounts between like $150, $300, depending. The one that I own actually came from a local shop, and I don't remember exactly how much I spent on it, but it was around there. And it has a Core i5 in it. So originally it had 4 gigabytes of memory in it when I bought it, but I ended up upgrading it to 20 gigs by putting a 16 gig kit of DDR3 RAM in it, and you can get that for around $40, depending. That's at least the going price right now. So for not a lot of money, you can end up with an i5 machine with 20 gigabytes of RAM that seems to be pretty good spec, but let's see if it can run this project. So this one's doing better than the Studio did. Okay, Let me skip ahead a little bit to the part. You can kind of see where the CPU is sitting. It's about 27%. Core i5 3470. So let's go to around here. So we were at about 50% CPU back here. Right here where we have the string runs, this is probably the most CPU. It was really the most intense portion across the board, disk-wise and CPU-wise both. So let's see how this goes. That worked pretty well, actually. And I was really impressed with that this is, I believe, I did some Cinebench testing just to see how these kind of stacked up against each other. This, I believe, is the second least powerful machine, and it was able to handle it. So I found that very, very impressive. So yeah, this is just a little business machine that I bought secondhand, put some more RAM in it, and there you go. All of the samples in this are running off of an SSD. That will help, but again, that's a pretty easy upgrade. So all in all, really, really impressed with the little HP machine. So the next machine is actually the laptop that I used while I was in college and doing my IT degree. And it has seen better days. It's missing trim pieces everywhere, but it still works. And it's actually a pretty powerful little machine. And so I decided to include it in this test just to show what was at the time a mid to high range laptop from around 2014 can do with audio in the year 2022. So this particular machine is slightly upgraded from the stock configuration. It originally had 8 gigabytes of RAM and a hard drive. I've upgraded it to 12 gigabytes of RAM, and everything is installed on an SSD. The processor is an i7 4700HQ, so that would be a 4th gen i7, basically. So it's a quad-core, 8-thread processor. So let's see how this laptop runs this project. So again, we're even at lower CPU utilization than the old gaming PC. Okay, so we're really not having any issues, unsurprisingly. So moving along here to a little bit more of an intense portion. And let's see how it handles the violin run. So, no issue here. So, unsurprisingly, this machine handles it actually pretty well, which honestly was kind of neat considering that I've had this machine for a long time and it's still able to hold its own against, more powerful machines. So it's kind of neat. So next up is a laptop from around 2017 or 2018. It is an Acer Nitro 5 gaming laptop that I purchased from Best Buy. This machine has a Core i5-8300H, which is a quad-core 8-thread CPU. It originally, I believe, had 8 gigabytes of RAM. I upgraded it to 16, and everything is running off of an SSD, like most of the machines in this lineup. So this is a more modern kind of gaming laptop with better specs than what we've had up to this point. So in theory, it should run this just fine. Now, one thing I should point out, if you're looking at this and you see the CPU usage a bit higher, this machine is not as clean of a Windows install. Most of the others were like clean Windows installs, but this is a machine that I use regularly. So it's got a few more programs running on it than the others. So as a result, the CPU usage at idle is a bit higher, but we'll see if that makes a difference. So you can see that Reaper's CPU utilization is lowest on this one than we've seen, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, let's take it to the second half. Not having any issues so far. All right, and our violin run portion. No issue. So really at this point, I mean, none of the machines are really going to have problems running this. It was really the first few that were going to have issues if they were going to present themselves. These are more just to show how different levels of hardware handle the same workload. And so as we've been getting into better and better hardware, you'll notice the CPU usage going down overall. So that's what we'd expect. And finally, we get to what I would consider to be one of the most reasonable machines for someone wanting to kind of get into virtual orchestration. This is an HP laptop directly from Best Buy, no customization or anything like that. Spec-wise, it has a Core i5 11th gen processor. It's a quad-core 8-thread part. And as far as RAM goes, it is 12 gigabytes. and the hard drive is an SSD, and that was how it was from the factory. No upgrades have been done to this machine. It's a reasonably priced machine. I believe it was less than $600 when I bought it. I'll have to double check that. But this is a machine that has very competent specs for not a lot of money, and I think it's a very good option for someone looking to get into this if it can run our project. Probably can, but let's make sure. All right, let's go to our second half. Finally, our violin runs. So unsurprisingly, that machine is able to handle that as well. So that means that aside from really one machine, every single one of these was able to handle running this track. And while this is not the exact version that I have out on iTunes and everywhere else, this is a track that I wrote, produced, and released. So in my opinion, that means that these machines are able to be used for virtual orchestration. So if you're wanting to get into virtual orchestration and you have a machine, depending on the level of spec, you can probably get started with it. You know, if you have a quad-core machine with 8 gigabytes of RAM, you can get started. You don't have to run out and buy a machine. If you don't have one, or if the one you have is like the Dell Studio from 2009, then you might have to think about getting an upgrade before you start. In that case, you could easily get by with an off-the-shelf HP laptop with, you know, reasonable specs for not a lot of money. That's what the last test was done on. So it's a really good time to kind of try to get into doing virtual orchestration if that's something you're interested in. You've got a lot of options computer-wise. You can go out and get a refurbished HP machine. Now that's something that not everyone would want to do, but if you're so inclined, you could easily get that and a RAM upgrade and a hard drive upgrade for probably less than $300. Maybe a little bit more, depending on what you get. But something like that, as is evidenced, can do this. So you've got options, and having options is always a good thing. So I hope this was helpful. It was very interesting. It was an interesting experiment to do. I enjoyed working on it, kind of enjoyed putting it together. If you have any questions, you know, leave them in the comments. I'll try to help as best as I can. If you like content like this, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell, liking the video, and put any future video ideas you might like to see in the comments, and I'll give them some thought. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.